He arrived at my husband's funeral with a briefcase under his arm and announced in front of everyone, "Now that Arthur is gone, I will be the owner of the family company." My daughter was already separating the keys to the main desk and the documents from the safe. But when I rose from my chair and said just 2 words, my son-in-law and my daughter froze in horror. Before continuing with this story, if you like this type of content, leave me a like and subscribe to the channel. Every bit of your support helps me keep sharing these life stories. And now, let me tell you everything from the beginning, because what happened that day at the wake was just the tip of the iceberg of a betrayal that had been brewing for months. My name is Celia Warren. I am 67 years old, and for 40 of them, I was the wife of Arthur Warren, a good, hardworking, and honest man. Together, we built an import-export business from scratch that today is worth over $3 million. Yes, 3 million. I don't say that to brag. I say it because that money represents 40 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of risking everything we had when no one believed in us. When I met Arthur, I was 25 years old and worked as a secretary at an accounting firm. He was a traveling salesman who dreamed of having his own business. We fell in love quickly, got married the following year, and 2 years later, our daughter Amanda was born. Back then, we lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with borrowed furniture and a refrigerator that made more noise than an old truck engine. Arthur worked from sunup to sundown, selling cleaning products door to door. Meanwhile, I took care of Amanda and, at night, I took in sewing for the neighbors to help with expenses. We didn't have much, but we had something money can't buy. We had a shared dream and the determination to make it real. I remember Arthur would come home with swollen feet, take off his shoes at the door, and tell me, "Celia, one day all this will be worth it. One day we'll have our own company, and Amanda will grow up without facing the hardships we did." And we worked for it. My God, how we worked. We saved every penny for 5 years. I stopped buying new clothes. Arthur quit smoking to save that money, and vacation was a concept that didn't exist in our vocabulary. But finally, in 1988, we saved enough money to rent a small storefront downtown. That's how Warren Imports, our company, was born. In the beginning, it was just the 2 of us. Arthur went out to find clients and suppliers, and I stayed at the store, answering the phone, organizing the merchandise, and handling all the accounting. Amanda, who was 7 years old then, spent her afternoons doing homework in a corner of the office while I worked. They were difficult years, I'm not going to lie. Hubo meses en que apenas teníamos para pagar el alquiler del local y pensamos en cerrar. Pero Alberto siempre me decía, "Si cerramos ahora, todo el sacrificio habrá sido en vano." Y seguíamos adelante. Little by little, with a lot of effort and honesty in every deal, the company began to grow. We got better suppliers, expanded our product line, and opened a second store. By the year 2000, we already had 15 employees and our own warehouse. Amanda was studying at a good private school, something that was a source of immense pride for us. We had managed to give her what we never had, stability and opportunities. The years passed, and our daughter became a woman. She majored in business administration in college, and there she met Maxwell Hayes, a young man who was also studying business. At first, he seemed like a polite and ambitious young man. Amanda introduced him to us when she was 23 years old and told us they were dating. Arthur welcomed him with open arms, as he always did with everyone. "If Amanda loves him, we love him too," my husband told me that night. Maxwell came from a middle-class family. His father was a bank employee, and his mother was a school teacher. Nothing wrong with that, of course. But from the beginning, I noticed something in the way Maxwell looked at our house, our cars, our company. It wasn't admiration exactly. It was something more like hunger, like unchecked ambition. But I kept my doubts quiet because Amanda seemed happy, and a mother always wants to see her daughter happy. They got married 3 years later, when Amanda was 26 and Maxwell was 28. We threw them a beautiful wedding. We paid for everything ourselves, because Maxwell's parents didn't have the resources for it. We bought them a condo as a wedding gift, and Arthur offered Maxwell a position at the company as sales manager. "He's family now," Arthur said, "and in this family we all work together." At first, everything seemed to go well. Maxwell worked hard, or at least it seemed that way. He arrived early, stayed late. He always had new ideas for expanding the business. Arthur was proud of him. "Look how lucky we are," he'd tell me. "Our son-in-law is smart and hard-working. When we're gone, he and Amanda will continue to grow what we built." I would nod, but inside I still had that strange feeling, that premonition that something wasn't quite right. Over time, I started to notice little things. The way Maxwell talked about the company, always using possessives. My office, my clients, my team. The way he would interrupt Arthur in meetings to impose his ideas. How he looked with a certain disdain at the older employees, those who had been with us from the beginning. And above all, how he treated Amanda. In public, he was the perfect husband, attentive and caring, but I saw them when they thought no one was watching. He spoke to her with impatience, with condescension, as if she were stupid. And Amanda had changed. My daughter, who was sweet and affectionate as a child, had become distant with me. She didn't call me anymore to tell me about her day. She didn't come over for coffee on Sundays like before. When I asked if everything was okay, she would smile stiffly and say, "Everything's perfect, Mom, just busy." But a mother knows when her daughter is lying. Life went on. The company continued to grow. By the year 2020, we already had 3 branches in different cities and over 50 employees. Arthur and I were thinking about gradually retiring, about letting the new generation take the reins. We were both 65 years old, we had worked our whole lives, and we wanted to enjoy a little peace. To travel, to see those places we had always dreamed of visiting but never had time for. It was then that Arthur began to feel sick. At first, it was small symptoms that Arthur ignored. Excessive fatigue, lack of appetite, stomach pains, he attributed to work stress. "It's just the years, Celia," he'd tell me, brushing it off. "I'm not 20 anymore to handle this pace." I insisted he go to the doctor, but he always postponed the appointment. There was an important contract to close, a meeting he couldn't miss, a new supplier to visit. Always an excuse. But I knew him too well. 40 years of marriage teaches you to read a person better than any book. I saw how he'd put his hand on his abdomen when he thought I wasn't looking, how he'd push food around on his plate, pretending he'd eaten, how his shirts were getting looser and looser because he was losing weight without realizing it, or perhaps realizing it but refusing to accept it. One morning last February, Arthur woke up with such intense pain that he couldn't get out of bed. I found him doubled over, his face pale and covered in a cold sweat. This time, I didn't accept any excuses. I called an ambulance, and they took him straight to the hospital. The next few hours were torture. Tests, blood work, CT scans. I waited in that sterile, impersonal hospital hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. When the doctor finally came out to talk to me, I knew from his expression that the news wasn't good. "Mrs. Warren, I need you to sit down," he said in that soft voice doctors use when they're about to shatter your life. And then he told me, "Pancreatic cancer, advanced stage, muy avanzado para cirugía. Quimioterapia agresiva era la única opción, y aún así las probabilidades no eran alentadoras." I felt the world stop. 40 years together. 40 years building a life, a family, a dream, and now a doctor was telling me it could all be over. That the man who slept beside me every night, who made me coffee every morning, who still held my hand when we walked in the park, might not be here in a few months. I called Amanda immediately. I expected her to come running, desperate to see her father. But her reaction surprised me. "How bad is it, Mom?" she asked, her voice seeming strangely controlled, almost cold. I explained what the doctor had said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm on my way," she finally said. "But I need to talk to Maxwell first. This changes a lot of things. This changes a lot of things." Those words echoed in my head. What things? What needed to change because her father was sick, other than worrying about his health, his life? But I didn't have time to think much about it because just then they let me in to see Arthur. He was awake, hooked up to several wires and IVs. He saw me come in and tried to smile. That smile of his that always made me feel like everything would be okay. "I know what you're going to say," he whispered, "that I should have gone to the doctor sooner." I sat beside him and took his hand. "I'm not going to say that," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm going to say that we're going to fight this together, just like we've fought everything else in these 40 years. Arthur squeezed my hand. Celia, if anything happens to me, I need you to know that everything is in order. The papers, the company, everything. You're going to be okay. I promise. I didn't want to hear him talk like that, as if he were saying goodbye. You're not going anywhere, I told him firmly. We still have many years left. We have to travel to Europe, remember? You always wanted to see Spain. Amanda and Maxwell arrived 2 hours later. My daughter entered the room and hugged her father, but it was a quick, almost procedural hug. Maxwell stayed in the doorway, hands in his pockets, observing the scene with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. What are the doctors saying? He asked, without approaching the bed. Arthur explained the situation with that calm he always had, even in the worst moments. Maxwell nodded slowly. I understand, he said. So you're going to be out of the office for a long time. Arthur winced. I don't know if from physical or emotional pain. Yes, I suppose so. But I trust that you and the team will keep everything running. Maxwell crossed his arms. Of course. But we're going to need to make important decisions. We can't leave the company without clear leadership at a time like this. The way he said it made my skin crawl. He hadn't asked how Arthur felt. He hadn't said he would pray for him or do everything possible to help. He had only talked about the company, decisions, leadership. Amanda remained silent, looking at her husband with an expression that wasn't disapproval. It was agreement. We'll talk about that when I get out of here, Arthur said, his voice tired. Right now, I need to rest. Maxwell nodded again. Right. Get some rest. We'll take care of everything. And there was something in that "we'll take care of everything" that sent a shiver down my spine. Arthur was hospitalized for a week. He started chemotherapy immediately. I stayed with him day and night, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair beside his bed. Amanda came to visit every 2 or 3 days, always in a hurry, always on her phone answering work messages. Maxwell only showed up twice more during that whole time, and both times it was to talk to Arthur about company matters. I overheard one of those visits by chance. I had stepped out into the hallway to talk on the phone with the company's accountant, David Chen, who needed me to authorize some urgent payments. When I returned, the room door was ajar, and I heard Maxwell's voice. Arthur, I know this isn't the best time, but we need to talk about succession. If things don't go as we hope, someone needs to be prepared to take control. Maxwell, I'm still alive, Arthur replied, his voice trying to be firm but sounding weak. And I plan to stay that way for many more years. Maxwell sighed with impatience. I'm not saying you won't. I'm just being realistic. The company can't be left without direction. We need a contingency plan. We need you to sign some documents giving me legal power to make decisions in case you can't. I froze in the hallway. Legal power? Maxwell was asking my sick husband to give him legal power over the company? Arthur was silent for a moment. There's already a contingency plan, he said finally. Celia has been my partner from the beginning. She knows everything about the company. If I can't be there, she makes the decisions. Maxwell let out a short, humorless laugh. Celia is your wife, Arthur. A great woman, don't get me wrong. But she doesn't know the business like I do. I've been working in operations, in sales, in expansion for 10 years. With all due respect, she only handles the administrative side. Only the administrative side. As if handling all the accounting, managing human resources, negotiating with banks, and keeping the finances in order for 40 years was just some insignificant thing. As if I hadn't been there from day one, when we couldn't even pay the rent on the storefront. I felt rage rise in my throat, but I forced myself to stay calm and keep listening. Maxwell, I appreciate your concern, Arthur said firmly, but things are as they should be. Celia and I founded this company together. She has just as much right as I do, if not more, to make decisions. I am not signing any document that changes that. There was a tense silence. As you wish, Maxwell said finally. But I hope you don't regret this decision. I entered the room right then, as if I hadn't heard anything. Maxwell looked at me as I entered, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something in his eyes that confirmed all my suspicions. It wasn't concern for his father-in-law. It was frustration that Arthur hadn't given him what he wanted. He said a quick goodbye with an excuse about an important meeting and left the room without meeting my eyes. Arthur held out his hand to me, and I went to his bed. "Did you hear any of that?" he asked. There was no point in lying to him. "Enough," I replied. Arthur closed his eyes, tired. "Celia, that boy worries me. Every day I see him more anxious, more impatient, as if he's waiting for something." I squeezed his hand. "Don't worry about that now. Just focus on getting better. I'll take care of the rest." But the truth was, I was worried too. Very worried. During the following weeks, as Arthur continued his chemotherapy treatments, I began to notice strange things at the company. Maxwell had started making decisions without consulting me, claiming they were urgent and that he didn't want to bother Arthur with work matters while he was sick. He had hired 2 new employees without going through human resources. He had changed suppliers for one of our main products without properly reviewing the contracts. When I confronted him about it, he looked at me with that condescending smile I hated so much. "Celia, I understand you want to be in the loop, but the truth is, these are operational decisions that need to be made quickly. We can't stop the business just because Arthur is sick. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." And Amanda, who was present during that conversation, nodded in agreement with her husband. "Mom, Maxwell has experience in this. Let him work." I felt like a stranger in my own company. The company that Arthur and I had built from scratch, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, but I decided not to make a scene right then. Arthur needed peace to recover, and I wasn't going to give him any more stress than he already had. The chemotherapy treatments were brutal. I watched my husband, that strong man who had worked tirelessly his whole life, weaken day by day. He lost his hair, he lost weight. His skin took on a grayish tone that broke my heart, but he never complained. "I'm going to beat this," he'd tell me every morning. "We have plans, Celia. We have to go to Spain. Remember? The medical expenses were enormous. Even though we had good insurance, there were experimental drugs that weren't covered, alternative treatments the doctors recommended, specialized care we needed to hire. I didn't hesitate for a second to use our personal savings. I sold some investments, took money from funds we had set aside for retirement. Arthur's life was worth more than any amount of money. It was on one of those afternoons, while I was reviewing bank statements at home, that Amanda arrived unannounced. She had Maxwell with her. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, in a serious tone I didn't like at all. They sat in the living room, and Maxwell took a folder out of his briefcase. "Celia, we've been reviewing the finances," he began, "and we're concerned about the amount of money you're spending on Arthur's treatment." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What do you mean you're concerned?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Amanda leaned forward. "Mom, we understand you want to do everything possible for Dad, but you have to be realistic. The doctors said the odds are low, very low. Is it worth spending all this money on treatments that probably won't work?" It felt like a slap in the face. "He is your father," I said, my voice trembling with indignation. "How can you even suggest he's not worth trying to save?" Maxwell held up a hand as if to calm the situation. "No one is saying that, Celia. We're just being practical. You've taken out almost $200,000 from the family savings in the last 3 months. If you keep going like this, you'll be left with nothing." "I'm not going to be left with nothing," I retorted firmly. "I have the company. We have properties. We have investments." Maxwell exchanged a look with Amanda. "That's exactly why we're here," he said. "We wanted to talk to you about the possibility of selling one of the properties. The beach house, for example. You two hardly ever use it. That sale could cover the medical expenses without touching more of the liquid savings. The beach house. The place where Arthur and I had spent every anniversary for the last 15 years. The place where we had planned to retire when the time came. Where we had dreamed of watching our grandchildren grow up one day." "No," I said flatly. "I am not selling that house." Amanda sighed with frustration. "Mom, you're being sentimental. It's just a house. Dad's health is more important, isn't it?" "Exactly," I replied, looking her straight in the eye. "That's why I'm going to use every penny necessary to save him. And if I have to sell properties, I will decide which ones and when." I don't need you two telling me how to manage my finances. Maxwell closed his folder with a sharp snap. Your finances are also the family's finances, Celia. What you do now is going to affect Amanda's inheritance. She has a right to an opinion. There it was. The truth finally coming out. They weren't worried about Arthur. They weren't worried about his recovery. They were worried about the money. They were worried about their inheritance. They were worried I would spend their money on keeping my husband alive. I think it's time for you to leave, I said, getting up from my chair. And the next time you come to my house, I hope it's to ask how your father and father-in-law is doing, not to count how much money I'm going to leave you when we die. Amanda turned red. Mom, you don't have to be like that. We're just trying to help, but I had had enough. Help me by worrying about Arthur. Help me by visiting him more often. Help me by making him feel loved and supported. That's the only help I need from you. They left without another word, but the seed of suspicion had already been planted in my mind. That night, when I went back to the hospital to stay with Arthur, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The questions about the company papers, the suggestions to sell properties, the way Maxwell talked as if Arthur were already dead, and worst of all, the coldness of my own daughter. The next day, while Arthur was sleeping after a particularly rough chemo session, I called Stephen Blackwood, our lawyer for decades. Stephen had been with us since we opened the company. He had drafted all our contracts. He had handled all our major legal transactions. He was a man of absolute trust. Stephen, I need you to check something for me, I said. I need to know exactly how the company shares are distributed. Who owns what percentages, everything. Stephen was quiet for a moment. Celia, did something happen? He asked with concern. Let's just say some questions have come up, I replied, without going into detail. And I need to have all the information clear. Stephen promised he would review all the documents and give me a full report in 2 days. Meanwhile, Arthur's health continued to be a roller coaster. There were good days when he seemed to regain some energy, when he could sit up in bed and chat almost normally. And there were terrible days when he could barely keep his eyes open, when the pain was so strong he needed morphine to bear it. I never left his side. I slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair, ate the terrible cafeteria food. I didn't care about anything but being with him. One night, Arthur woke up in the early hours of the morning and found me asleep, with my head resting on the edge of his bed. He gently touched my hair to wake me. Celia, he whispered, are you awake? I lifted my head, drowsy. I'm here, I murmured. Do you need something? Are you in pain? He shook his head. I need to tell you something important, he said, his voice serious. Something I've been putting off because I didn't want to scare you, but I think it's time. I sat up straight, wide awake now. What is it? Arthur took my hand. I've been watching Maxwell, and Amanda, too, and I don't like what I see. I've noticed it too, I admitted, squeezing his hand. Every day they're more interested in the money and less in your health. Arthur nodded slowly. It's more than that, Celia. 2 weeks ago, when you had gone home to shower and change, Maxwell came alone. He brought me some documents, said they were routine company authorizations, things that needed my urgent signature so operations wouldn't stop. A shiver ran down my spine. What documents were they? Arthur winced. That's what worries me. I read them carefully, even though Maxwell was trying to rush me, saying a courier was waiting downstairs. They weren't routine authorizations. They were documents naming him as CEO, with full decision-making power over the company. Basically, he was asking me to sign over control of everything while I was incapacitated. Rage surged through me like a wave. And what did you do? I told him I was dizzy and couldn't read well, that he should come back another day with Stephen present so the lawyer could explain everything. He was furious, though he tried to hide it. He said it was urgent, that it couldn't wait, but I didn't sign anything. He left with the unsigned papers and hasn't mentioned it since. My God, I whispered. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You were exhausted taking care of me. I didn't want to add more worries, but I spoke to Stephen today. I asked him to come early tomorrow, before visiting hours. We need to fix some things. Celia, we need to protect ourselves from whatever Maxwell and Amanda are planning. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake watching my husband breathe, connected to all those wires and machines, and I thought about the 40 years we'd been together. I thought about everything we had built, and I thought about how our own daughter, the girl we had raised with so much love and sacrifice, was now more worried about her inheritance than about her father being alive. Stephen arrived the next day at 8 in the morning, just as Arthur had asked. He brought a thick folder full of documents. He sat beside Arthur's bed and motioned for me to come closer too. "All right," Stephen began in a professional tone. "I've reviewed everything as you asked, Celia, and there are things you need to know." He opened the folder and took out several documents. First, the current structure of the company. Warren Imports is divided as follows. Arthur owns 30% of the shares. Celia owns 70%. It has always been this way since you founded the company, although many don't know it because Arthur has traditionally been the public face of the business. I stared at him. "I own 70%? Stephen nodded. "Yes. When you founded the company, you decided on that distribution because Celia had put in more of the initial capital from the money she'd saved from her sewing jobs. Don't you remember?" The memory hit me suddenly. It was true. I had saved more money than Arthur in those early years because my sewing jobs paid better than his door-to-door sales. When we formalized the company, the accountant at the time had suggested that difference be reflected in the shares. "We forgot those details over the years," Arthur said, his voice weak but satisfied. "We never cared who had more or less. Everything belonged to both of us anyway," Stephen continued. "Exactly. For all practical purposes, you've always operated as equal partners. But legally, Celia is the majority owner of the company. She has control." "Does Maxwell know this?" I asked. Stephen shook his head. "There's no reason he would. That information isn't public. It's only in the company's legal incorporation documents and tax returns, which only you two, I, and the accountant have access to." I felt a weight lift off my chest. "So Maxwell can't take control of the company even if Arthur signed something?" "Not without your consent," Stephen confirmed. "You are the majority shareholder. Any major decision needs your approval. But there's something else we need to discuss." He took another document from the folder. "Arthur called me a week ago and asked me to prepare some things. An updated will, mainly." Arthur looked at me. "Celia, if anything happens to me, I want everything to be clear. I don't want Maxwell or anyone to be able to hurt you or take what's yours." Stephen continued. "Arthur's will is very simple. Everything he owns, including his 30% of the company, all properties in his name, all bank accounts, everything passes directly to Celia. There is no inheritance for Amanda until Celia decides what to do with the estate." "Is that legal?" I asked, surprised. "Can I disinherit my daughter?" Stephen clarified. "He's not completely disinheriting her. She would have a right to a legal share when Celia passes. But for now, everything remains under Celia's control. It's a way to protect the assets from potential bad decisions or manipulation. Furthermore, there is a special clause that Arthur insisted on including." I looked at my husband curiously. Stephen read from the document. "If at any time it is proven that Amanda or her spouse attempted to manipulate, pressure, or take advantage of Arthur or Celia during their illness or after their passing, they will automatically lose any right to future inheritance." Arthur squeezed my hand. "I don't trust Maxwell, Celia. And it pains me to say it, but I don't trust Amanda to resist his influence either. This will protect you. It protects everything we built." Tears rolled down my cheeks. "I don't want to talk about wills." "You're not going to die." Arthur smiled tenderly. "We're all going to die someday, my love. But hopefully, I still have many years left. This is just a precaution. Like the house insurance, remember? We hope we never need it, but it's good to have it." Stephen had us sign several documents. He brought in 2 witnesses from the hospital, nurses who didn't know us, to validate the signatures. Everything was legalized and notarized in less than an hour. "I will keep these documents in my personal safe," Stephen said. "No one but the 3 of us knows they exist. When the time comes, if it comes, I will handle everything." After Stephen left, Arthur and I sat in silence for a long time. "Do you think we're being unfair to Amanda?" I finally asked. Arthur sighed. "I think we're being realistic. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the day comes when we can tear up this will and make a new one where Amanda receives everything with love and trust. But until that day comes, I need to know that you will be protected." The following days were strangely quiet. Amanda and Maxwell didn't show up at the hospital for almost a week. When they finally did come, it was with a different attitude, more distant, more formal, as if something had changed between us, but no one wanted to mention it. Maxwell politely asked about Arthur's health, stayed for exactly 15 minutes, and left with the excuse of an important meeting. Amanda stayed a little longer. She tried to make superficial conversation about the weather, about a vacation they were planning. But she didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't offer to stay with me, even though she knew I hadn't slept well in weeks. She didn't bring the homemade food she knew I loved. It was like talking to a polite but disinterested stranger. When she left, Arthur looked at me sadly. "See what I was telling you? Something is wrong with her. That's not the Amanda we raised." I nodded, my heart breaking. It's the Amanda that Maxwell molded. And I don't know if we'll ever get our daughter back. But the problems were just beginning. One afternoon, David Chen, our trusted accountant, called me urgently. "Celia, I need to talk to you immediately. It's about the company." The tone of his voice alarmed me. "What's wrong?" David hesitated. "I'd rather tell you in person. Can you come to the office?" I told him I'd be there in an hour. I left Arthur in the care of the nurses and drove to the office. David was waiting for me in the conference room, papers spread all over the table. His expression was grave. "Celia, I've been reviewing the financial movements of the last 2 months. There are things that don't add up." I felt a knot in my stomach. "What kind of things?" David pointed to several bank statements. "Large transfers to accounts I don't recognize. Payments to new suppliers without corresponding contracts. Cash withdrawals without justification. In total, we're talking about almost $100,000 that have left the company accounts without proper authorization." I sank into a chair, feeling like my legs wouldn't hold me. "Who authorized these transfers?" David showed me the digital signatures. Maxwell used his authorization as general manager to approve all these movements. Technically, he's allowed to make transactions up to $50,000 without consulting, but these movements exceed that limit, and he did them in several parts so they wouldn't trigger the system's automatic alarms. "Where did that money go?" I asked, trying to stay calm. David flipped through the pages until he reached a summary. "That's the most suspicious part. Some transfers went to what appear to be legitimate supplier companies, but when I called to verify, those companies have no record of doing business with us. Otras fueron a cuentas personales que rastreé hasta llegar a una empresa fantasma registrada a nombre de Amanda Warren Hayes. The world stopped around me. My own daughter. My daughter was stealing from the family company while her father was fighting for his life in a hospital." "Are you sure about this, David?" I asked, my voice trembling. David nodded grimly. "Completely sure. I've triple-checked everything. Celia, this is fraud. This is a felony." I took the documents with shaking hands. "Who else knows about this?" David shook his head. "Just me. I came straight to you as soon as I discovered the pattern. What do you want me to do?" I needed to think. I needed time to process that my daughter, the little girl I had held in my arms, whom I had raised with all the values Arthur and I held sacred, was stealing from me. "Don't do anything yet," I said finally. "Don't tell anyone, especially not Maxwell or Amanda. Make copies of all these documents and keep them in a safe place. And from now on, I want any transaction over $10,000 to require my personal signature, not Maxwell's. Not anyone else's, only mine." David nodded. "I'll do it right away." "Are you going to confront them?" "Not yet," I replied. "First, I need to talk to Stephen. I need to know exactly what my legal options are." I returned to the hospital with a shattered heart. Arthur was awake, looking out the window. When he saw me enter, he knew immediately that something bad had happened. "What happened?" he asked, alarmed. I told him everything. Every detail of what David had discovered. I saw disappointment and pain fill his eyes. $100,000, he murmured. "My own daughter is stealing from me while I'm here hooked up to these machines, fighting for every day of life." Tears rolled down his face. They weren't tears of physical pain. They were tears of a father betrayed by his daughter. I held him as he cried, and I cried with him. We cried for the daughter we had lost, for the family that was being destroyed, for the dreams that were shattering. When he finally calmed down, Arthur looked at me with determination. "Call Stephen. Tell him to come tomorrow. It's time for Amanda and Maxwell to know they're not going to get away with this." That night, I called the lawyer and explained the situation. Stephen was silent for a few moments after hearing everything. "This changes things. Celia, this is no longer just precautionary. This is evidence of a crime. If you want, we can press criminal charges." "I don't want to go that far yet," I admitted. "She's my daughter, Stephen. Even if she betrayed me, she's still my daughter." Stephen sighed. "I understand, but you need to protect yourself. Tomorrow I'll bring documents to immediately revoke all the powers Maxwell has in the company. I'll also prepare a full audit order. And I think it's time for Amanda to know about Arthur's will, to know that her actions have consequences." The next day, Stephen arrived early as promised. He brought more documents and a recorder. "We're going to document everything," he explained, "just in case things get ugly legally." I signed all the papers revoking Maxwell's powers in the company. I authorized the full audit, and then Stephen took out a copy of Arthur's will. "Do you want me to be present when you tell Amanda?" he asked. Arthur shook his head. "No, this is something we need to do as a family, even if it doesn't feel like one anymore." I called Amanda and asked her to come to the hospital that afternoon. "Is something wrong with Dad?" she asked, in a tone that sounded more irritated than concerned. "We need to talk. It's important." That was all I said. Amanda arrived at 3 in the afternoon. She came alone, without Maxwell, which was a relief. She sat beside her father's bed with a cautious expression, as if she knew something bad was coming. Arthur got straight to the point. "Amanda, I know about the money. I know you and Maxwell have been taking money from the company without authorization. I know everything." Amanda's face went pale. "Dad, I can explain." Arthur raised his hand to stop her. "I don't want explanations. I want you to know the consequences of your actions. First, as of this moment, Maxwell has no decision-making power in the company. All his privileges have been revoked. Second, a full audit is being conducted, and you will have to return every cent you took. And third, I want you to see my will." He handed her a copy of the document. Amanda read it with trembling hands. I watched her eyes grow wider with each paragraph. When she finished, she looked at me with a mixture of shock and indignation. "You're disinheriting me?" she asked, her voice sharp. Arthur replied firmly. "I'm teaching you that actions have consequences. If you had been a loyal daughter, if you had thought about anything other than money while I was sick, things would be different. But you chose to betray us. You chose to steal. So now you live with the consequences." Amanda stood up abruptly. "This is Maxwell's fault. He convinced me. He said it was our right, that the company belonged to us too." I finally spoke. "You are a grown woman, Amanda. You decided to participate. You signed the papers. You created that shell company. You can't just blame Maxwell." Amanda looked at me with eyes full of tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage. "I always knew I wasn't good enough for you," she said, her voice filled with resentment. "I was never good enough, smart enough, important enough. Everything was always about the company, about the money, about building a legacy. And what about me? What place did I have in all that?" Her words hit me like punches. "Amanda, everything we did for you. To give you a good life, so you wouldn't face the hardships we did." "I didn't ask for any of that," she screamed. "I asked you to see me, to spend time with me, to choose me over work, just once." But no, it was always the company first. Always. Arthur tried to sit up straighter in bed, pain visible on his face. "Amanda, if you felt neglected, I'm sorry. I truly am. But that doesn't justify what you did. It doesn't justify stealing, lying, and taking advantage of your father being sick." Amanda let out a bitter laugh. "You know what's funny? Maxwell was right. He said you would never see me as an equal in the company, that I would always just be the daughter, never the successor, that we needed to take what was ours because you would never give it to us." And he was right. I got up and walked over to her. Amanda, if you had come to us and said you wanted more involvement in the company, if you had shown real interest in learning the business instead of just waiting to inherit it, things would have been different. Lies, she spat. The company is your baby. You never would have given me real control. I would have always just been an ornament, a figurehead on the payroll. Arthur closed his eyes, exhausted. Celia, please ask her to leave. I don't have the strength for this. I walked Amanda to the door of the room. Before leaving, she turned to me. You're going to regret this, Mom. When Dad is gone and you're all alone, you're going to regret pushing me away. The only one who is going to have regrets is you, I replied firmly. When you have time to reflect on what you did, on how you treated your father in his most difficult moments, you're going to have to live with that guilt for the rest of your life. Amanda left, slamming the door so hard it echoed down the hospital corridor. I went back into the room and found Arthur crying silently. I sat beside him and took his hand. We did the right thing, he said between sobs. Didn't we, Celia? We did the right thing. I nodded, even though my own heart was in pieces. The days following that confrontation were the darkest of my life. Arthur fell into a deep depression that not even the antidepressants they prescribed could fully lift. It wasn't just the cancer that was killing him. It was the pain of having lost his daughter. 40 years working to build something to leave her, he'd say, staring at the ceiling. And in the end, it was all for nothing. We didn't just build a company. We built a daughter who sees us as obstacles between her and the money. I tried to comfort him, but the truth was, I was shattered too. Every night when I closed my eyes, I saw Amanda as a little girl. I saw her on her first day of school, nervous but excited. I saw her at her graduation, beautiful in her cap and gown. I saw her at her wedding, radiant with happiness. At what point had that sweet girl turned into the cold, calculating woman who had entered this room, ready to defend herself for stealing from her own parents? Amanda never came back to the hospital. She didn't even call to ask how her father was. It was as if we had ceased to exist for her. Maxwell, for his part, tried to contact me several times. He left messages on my phone with a conciliatory, almost slimy tone. Celia, I think we all got carried away by emotions. We should talk calmly, like adults, for the good of the family. I never responded. David went ahead with the audit as I had instructed. The results were even worse than we thought. It wasn't $100,000 they had stolen. It was almost $200,000. Maxwell had been very careful, very meticulous in hiding the money trail. He had created an entire network of shell companies, fake invoices, payments to non-existent suppliers. It was an elaborate, deliberate fraud he had been planning for months, maybe years. This requires pressing criminal charges, Stephen insisted when he saw the audit results. There's no other option, Celia. If you don't, you'd be an accomplice to a cover-up. But Arthur begged me to wait. Give me time, he asked, his voice weak. Maybe Amanda will come to her senses. Maybe when she sees we're serious, she'll decide to leave Maxwell and fix things. I knew it was impossible, but I didn't have the heart to take away that last hope. Meanwhile, the chemotherapy treatments continued. The doctors said they were seeing promising signs. The tumor had shrunk a bit. It wasn't a cure, but it was something. A small light in the midst of so much darkness. Arthur clung to that hope with all his strength. I'm going to beat this, he'd tell me. I'm going to beat this, and we're going to fix everything. We're going to get our daughter back. But the body has its limits. After 6 months of intensive chemotherapy, after losing 30 pounds, after countless sessions that left him so weak he could barely lift his head, the cancer was still there. Smaller, less aggressive, but there. The doctors called us in for a meeting. We've reached the point where the chemotherapy is doing more harm than good, the oncologist explained gravely. Arthur's body can't take any more. So what do we do? I asked, my heart in my throat. The doctor sighed. We can switch to palliative care. Keep him comfortable, pain-free, and let him spend the time he has left with dignity and quality of life. I felt the floor open up beneath me. How much time? I managed to articulate. The doctor hesitated. It's hard to say for sure. It could be months. It could be weeks. Every person is different. That night, I told Arthur what the doctor had said. I expected him to break down, to panic, to refuse to accept it. But instead, he looked at me with a calm I hadn't seen in months. "It's okay," he said simply. "I'm tired, Celia. So tired of fighting, I want to go home. I want to spend my last days in my own bed, looking at my garden, sleeping next to my wife. I don't want to die in this hospital surrounded by machines." So I took him home. We hired private nurses who came 3 times a day. We set up a hospital bed in our bedroom. We filled the nightstand with all the pain medication he needed. And we began what the doctors called the final phase. It sounds horrible when you say it like that. So clinical, so cold. But in reality, those last weeks were the most peaceful we had spent in a long time. Arthur spent his mornings sitting on the patio, looking at the garden he loved so much. I would sit beside him and read him the newspaper. Sometimes we talked about memories, about our first years together, when we had nothing but each other, about the difficult clients who had made us laugh, about the times we thought we wouldn't be able to make payroll and magically got a new client just in time. "Remember when Amanda was 5 and brought home that stray dog?" he said one afternoon. "You said we couldn't keep him because we barely had enough to feed ourselves. But she looked at you with those big eyes, and you said yes anyway." I laughed through my tears, and we had Buster for 12 years. "He was a good dog," Arthur nodded. "He was a good dog, and Amanda was a good girl. I don't know what happened. I don't know where we went wrong." "We didn't go wrong," I said, taking his hand. "We did the best we could with what we knew. Amanda made her own choices. We are not responsible for her mistakes." Arthur closed his eyes. "I'd like to see her one more time. Just one more time before I go." I called Amanda that same day. She answered on the 5th ring. "What do you want, Mom?" she asked, her tone irritated. I took a deep breath. "Your father is home. The doctor said he has a few weeks left. He wants to see you." There was a long silence. "Is this a trap? Are you going to have me arrested if I come?" The question hurt more than I expected. "It's not a trap, Amanda. It's your father asking you to come say goodbye. But if you don't want to come, that's your decision." She hung up without saying another word. I waited. 1 day, 2 days, a week. Amanda never came. Arthur never said anything about it, but I saw the pain in his eyes every time he heard a car pull up outside. Every time he hoped it was her. And every time it was just the mailman, or the nurse, or the gardener. It was never Amanda. One night, 2 weeks after we got home, Arthur woke me up. "Celia, I need you to promise me something." I sat up immediately. "Alert, anything. When I'm gone, you're going to be alone. Amanda won't be there for you. But I want you to know that everything we did, everything we built, was to give you security. So you'd never have to depend on anyone. Promise me you won't let Maxwell or Amanda take what's yours. Promise me you'll be strong." Tears rolled down my cheeks. "I promise." Arthur smiled. "You're stronger than you think. You always have been. I was just the face of the company, but you were the heart. You were the one who kept everything running." The days passed slowly. Arthur slept more and more. He spoke less and less. The pain medication got stronger and stronger. I stayed by his side the whole time, holding his hand, talking to him even when I wasn't sure he could hear me. I told him stories from our life together. I thanked him for all the happy years. I told him I wasn't afraid of being alone, even though it was a lie. I was terrified. One October morning, Arthur didn't wake up. Well, technically he was still alive. His heart was beating, he was breathing with the help of oxygen, but he no longer opened his eyes. The nurse explained that he had entered a state of unconsciousness from which he probably wouldn't return. "It's a matter of hours," she told me gently. "Maybe days." I called Amanda, Maxwell answered. "Celia, Amanda doesn't want to talk to you." I kept my voice firm. "Tell her that her father is dying right now. If she wants to say goodbye, this is her last chance." I heard muffled voices on the other end. Maxwell came back. "She says she'll think about it." And he hung up. Arthur died that night at 11:40. I was by his side, holding his hand. The nurse had left the room to give us privacy. It was peaceful. He just stopped breathing. There was no drama, No final desperate gasp like in the movies. Just one moment he was here, and the next he was gone. I sat next to him for hours, still holding his hand as it grew cold. 40 years together. 40 years of laughter and tears, of successes and failures, of love and partnership. And now he was gone. He had left me alone in a world that no longer made sense without him. I finally called the funeral home. They came discreetly in the early hours and took his body. I stayed in that empty room, looking at the bed where my husband had spent his last weeks. The sheet still held the shape of his body. The pillow still had the indent of his head. And I had no more tears left to cry. We arranged the funeral for 3 days later. Stephen helped me with all the legal paperwork. We put the notice in the paper. Arthur Warren, founder of Warren Imports, passed away surrounded by love at the age of 67. We didn't mention that the love was only from his wife, because his daughter hadn't come, not even in his final moments. The morning of the funeral, I dressed in black. I put on the pearl necklace Arthur had given me for our 20th anniversary. I carefully applied makeup to hide the dark circles from weeks of poor sleep. I looked in the mirror and saw a 67-year-old woman who had aged 10 years in the last 6 months. But I also saw a woman who was still standing, a woman who hadn't broken, despite everything. The service was at an elegant funeral home downtown. I arrived early to make sure everything was perfect. The polished mahogany casket Arthur would have chosen, the white flowers he loved so much, the photos of our life arranged on a table, our wedding, the opening of the first store, Amanda as a baby. Happy moments that now seemed like they'd happened in another life. The company employees began to arrive. More than 50 people who had worked with us over the years. Some were crying openly. Others came up to offer their condolences, their voices breaking. Mr. Warren was a good man, they told me. The company won't be the same without him. I nodded and thanked them, running on autopilot. Lauren Price, my best friend, arrived with her husband. She hugged me tightly without saying a word. Sometimes, words aren't needed. Lauren had been with me from the beginning, from those days when Arthur and I barely had enough to eat. She knew everything we had built and everything we had lost. Stephen arrived shortly after with his wife. He stood by my side like a silent guard, ready to protect me from whatever might come. And then, at 10 in the morning, just as the service was about to begin, Amanda and Maxwell arrived. But they didn't come alone or empty-handed. Maxwell was carrying a leather briefcase under his arm. Amanda was carrying her largest handbag, the one she used when she traveled. And they both had an expression on their faces that made my blood run cold. It wasn't grief. It wasn't remorse. It was determination. They approached the casket. Amanda looked at her father's body for exactly 10 seconds. She didn't cry. She didn't touch the casket. She didn't say a prayer. She just looked and then turned to me. "Mom, we need to talk. It's important." I was stunned. "Now? At your father's funeral?" Maxwell stepped forward. "That's precisely why we need to talk now. There are urgent company matters that cannot wait." The employees who were nearby began to listen. An uncomfortable murmur spread through the room. Lauren took my arm, as if to give me strength. "This can wait," I told Maxwell firmly. "We are here to say goodbye to Arthur, not to talk about business." Maxwell shook his head. "No, Celia, this can't wait. You see, now that Arthur has passed, there are changes that need to be made immediately in the company structure." He opened his briefcase and took out several documents. "I've consulted with my own lawyers," he continued loudly, clearly aware that everyone was listening, "and according to inheritance laws, Amanda is entitled to half of everything Arthur owned. That includes his share of the company. As her husband and legal representative, I will be assuming control of those shares. And with Arthur's stake combined with the contacts and contracts I've developed, I am effectively the new CEO of Warren Imports." The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone was watching us. Stephen took a step toward Maxwell. "That is not correct. Arthur had a will that clearly specifies." Maxwell cut him off. "A will that was never properly filed. My lawyers already verified it. Celia, I know this is hard for you, but business is business. Don't worry, we're not going to kick you out. You can stay on as an administrative manager if you want, with a good salary, of course. I felt like I was in a nightmare. This couldn't be happening. Not at my husband's funeral. Not in front of all these people. Amanda finally spoke. Mom, I know you're hurt about what happened between us. But this isn't personal. It's just business. Dad is gone, and someone has to take control. Maxwell has the experience. He has the vision. Under his leadership, the company is going to grow like never before. Business? I repeated, my voice beginning to tremble with rage. Your father has been dead for less than 72 hours, and you come to his funeral to talk about business? To claim an inheritance that isn't even yours? Maxwell smiled smugly. It's mine by law, Celia, and there's nothing you can do about it. Look, I know you've been emotionally unstable lately. It's understandable. You lost your husband, but that doesn't qualify you to run a $3 million company. You need to rest, to grieve, to let capable people take charge. Amanda took a set of keys out of her bag. The keys to the main company office. The keys to the warehouse. The keys to everything. Maxwell is going to need these, she said, holding them out to him. That's what made me snap. Seeing my daughter hand the keys to everything Arthur and I had built to this man who had stolen from us, who had lied to us, who had manipulated our daughter until she became a stranger. I rose from my chair. Everyone present fell silent, waiting for my reaction. I walked slowly toward Maxwell. I looked him directly in the eyes, and then I said just 2 words. 2 words that had been waiting to be said for months. You're fired. Maxwell blinked, confused. What? I repeated, this time with more force. You're fired. As of this moment, you no longer work for Warren Imports. You are banned from entering the offices, the warehouse, or any company property. If you do, I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. Maxwell let out a nervous laugh. Celia, you can't fire me. I'm the owner now. I turned to Stephen. Stephen, please explain to Mr. Hayes who really owns Warren Imports. Stephen took a folder from his own briefcase. With pleasure, Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Warren Hayes, and everyone present. Arthur Warren owned 30% of the shares of Warren Imports. Celia Warren owned 70%. It has always been this way since the company's founding. Celia is, and always has been, the majority shareholder and primary owner. Maxwell's face lost all its color. That's impossible. Arthur was the founder. He was the president. Stephen continued, relentless. Arthur was the president because both partners decided it that way. But legally, Celia has always held the majority control. And as for Arthur's will, it is perfectly filed and notarized. Everything Arthur owned, including his 30% of the company, passes directly to Celia. There is no inheritance for Amanda until Celia decides what to do with the estate. Amanda stared at me, her eyes wide. That can't be legal. I have rights as his daughter. Stephen showed her the documents. You have rights to a legal portion, eventually, but not now. And your husband certainly has no right to anything. He was never a partner. He was only ever an employee. Maxwell tried to snatch the documents from Stephen's hands. Let me see that. This is fraud. 2 of the biggest guys from the company, who had been watching from the back, stepped forward. Ray and Luis. Both had worked in the warehouse for over 15 years. They were big, strong, loyal men. Do you need help, Mrs. Warren? Ray asked in a firm voice. I nodded. Yes. Please escort Mr. Hayes out of this building. He is no longer welcome here. Maxwell took a step back. You can't touch me. This is a public place. Stephen interjected. This is a private property. The funeral home is rented in the name of the Warren family, and Mrs. Warren has every right to ask you to leave. Ray and Luis positioned themselves on either side of Maxwell. They didn't touch him, but their presence alone was intimidating. Maxwell looked to Amanda for support, but my daughter was paralyzed, staring at the document Stephen still held. Amanda, Maxwell called out, his voice desperate. Amanda, say something. They can't do this to us. Amanda finally reacted. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. Mom, is it true? Were you always the main owner? Yes, I replied firmly. From day one. But your father and I never talked about it because it didn't matter to us. We were partners. We were a team. Everything we had belonged to both of us. We never thought the day would come when that legal distinction would matter. Amanda shook her head, confused, but Dad was always the one making the big decisions. He was the president, the one who talked to the big clients, the one who was the public face of the business, I interrupted. Because we decided that together. Because your father was better with people, and I was better with numbers. But that doesn't mean he was the sole owner. I founded this company with him. I put in more money at the start. I handled the books for 40 years. I negotiated with the banks when we needed loans. I kept things running when your father was traveling, finding new suppliers. I was always his equal partner, Amanda. Your mistake was assuming I was just his wife. Maxwell tried to regain control. Fine. Let's say that's true. But I've still worked at that company for 10 years. I have contracts. I have deals with clients. I have invaluable knowledge of the business. You can't just fire me like this. I crossed my arms. Oh, can't I? Stephen, can I fire an employee who has committed fraud? Stephen nodded. Not only can you must. And furthermore, you should press criminal charges. I took a folder from my own handbag, the folder David had prepared with all the audit results. Mr. Hayes, here is the complete evidence of the nearly $200,000 that you and my daughter stole from the company over the last 6 months. Shell companies, fake invoices, unauthorized transfers, all documented, all traced, all with your digital signatures. I held the folder out to him. You can keep it. I have 5 more copies in secure locations. Maxwell's face went from white to red. You can't prove anything. Those were legitimate business transactions. David Chen, our accountant, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. I can prove every cent, Mr. Hayes. I've traced every transfer to your personal accounts and the shell companies registered in your wife's name. I have the bank records, the fake contracts, everything. And I am willing to testify in court if necessary. Amanda started to tremble. Mom, we didn't mean to. Maxwell said it was just reallocating resources, that it was legal. I turned to my daughter. Amanda, you are a 42-year-old woman with a college degree in business. Don't pretend you didn't know what you were doing. You created shell companies in your name. You signed documents. You transferred money. You knew perfectly well you were stealing. Lauren, who had been watching everything from my side, finally spoke. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Arthur died believing that maybe you two would come to your senses. He died waiting for Amanda to come say goodbye. He died of a broken heart, because of his own daughter. Her words visibly struck Amanda. My daughter put her hands to her face and began to sob. I wanted to come. I did. I wanted to say goodbye. But Maxwell said it was a trap, that you were going to have us arrested. And you were right to be afraid, I said coldly. Because that is exactly what I'm going to do if you don't return every cent you stole. Maxwell exploded. We're not returning anything. That money is legally ours. Amanda is your daughter. She has a right to that company. I stepped up to him until I was inches from his face. Amanda has a right to what I decide to give her. And right now, after what you did, after how you treated Arthur in his final months, she deserves nothing. I turned to all those present, employees, friends, business acquaintances. They had all witnessed this humiliating scene. I want everyone here to be a witness to what I'm about to say, I announced, my voice clear and firm. Maxwell Hayes is fired from Warren Imports, effective immediately. He is banned from all our facilities. First thing tomorrow, I am changing all the locks and all the access codes. If he attempts to enter, he will be arrested for trespassing, I continued. As for my daughter, Amanda, she is, as of this moment, suspended from any activity in the company until the matter of the stolen money is resolved. If the full $200,000 is not returned by the end of this month, I will be pressing criminal charges against both of you for fraud and embezzlement. And I don't care if you're my daughter. This isn't personal anymore. As you said yourself, Amanda, this is just business. Amanda fell to her knees. Mom, please. We don't have the money. We spent it. On. On things for the house. On trips. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They had spent the stolen money while her father was dying. While I was draining my savings to pay for his treatments, they were spending stolen money on luxuries. The rage I felt in that moment was something I had never experienced before. Then you'd better find a way to get it, I said, my voice like ice. Sell your condo. Sell your cars. Sell whatever you have to. But I want that money back. Maxwell, seeing the situation was completely lost, tried one last tactic. If you do this, you'll lose your daughter forever. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to be completely alone? I looked him straight in the eye. I already lost my daughter the day she decided that money was more important than her dying father. And as for being alone, I prefer solitude to the company of people who only see me as a source of money. Stephen gestured to Ray and Luis. Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Hayes out of the building. And make sure he doesn't return. The two men took Maxwell by the arms, firmly but not violently. Maxwell struggled a bit. This isn't over. I'm going to sue. I'll take this to court. Stephen smiled coldly. Please do. I would love to present all this evidence before a judge. I'm sure it will be very interesting. They dragged Maxwell out as he shouted threats and insults. His voice faded as he was removed from the building. Amanda remained there, kneeling on the floor, sobbing. Part of me wanted to comfort her. She was my daughter. I had held her in my arms as a baby. I had cared for her when she was sick. I had watched her grow into a woman. But another part of me, the part that had watched Arthur die while she didn't even come to say goodbye, that part felt nothing but disappointment. Amanda, I said, my voice tired, you can stay for the funeral if you truly want to say goodbye to your father. But after today, I don't want to see you again until you have the full amount. And when you have it, you will deliver it through Stephen. I want no direct contact with you. Amanda looked up, makeup streaked by tears. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. I shook my head. You're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you lost control of the company you thought you'd inherit. But you're not sorry you betrayed your father. I turned around and went back to my seat in the front row, in front of Arthur's casket. Murmurs filled the room. People spoke in low voices, processing what they had just witnessed. Lauren sat next to me and took my hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Arthur would be, too. The service finally began. The pastor spoke about Arthur, about his life of hard work and dedication. Some employees shared anecdotes about his generosity and good humor. I listened to it all in a daze, still processing what had just happened. Amanda sat in the back of the room for the entire service. She didn't approach the casket again. She didn't speak to anyone. When it was all over, she left in silence. The days following the funeral were strange. The house was too quiet without Arthur. Every corner reminded me of him. His favorite coffee mug, still in the cabinet. His armchair in the living room where he read the paper every morning. His side of the bed, now empty and cold. But I didn't let myself fall apart. I had work to do. The first thing was the company. Just as I'd promised, I changed all the locks. I changed all the access codes. I reviewed every contract Maxwell had signed in the last 2 years and canceled the ones that looked suspicious. I hired external auditors to review absolutely everything. And I called a meeting with all the employees. I explained the situation without going into overly personal family details. I told them there had been financial irregularities, that Maxwell no longer worked for us, and that I would be personally assuming full control of operations. I expected resistance. I expected doubt. But instead, I received something I didn't expect. Applause. Mrs. Warren, said Ray, standing up. A lot of us have been here for over 15 years. We watched you and Mr. Warren build this from scratch. We know who really kept everything running. We're with you. One by one, all the employees stood and clapped. I felt tears roll down my cheeks, but this time they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude. I wasn't as alone as I thought. I had a team that believed in me. That same week, I promoted David Chen to Chief Financial Officer. I promoted Ray to Operations Manager. I hired Paula Lopez, a very capable young administrator, as my personal assistant, and I started to learn everything I didn't know about the areas Arthur used to handle. It was hard. There were days I thought I couldn't do it. Days I missed Arthur so much I could barely breathe. But I kept going. For him. For me. For everything we had built together. 2 weeks after the funeral, Stephen called me. "Celia, I have news. Amanda and Maxwell deposited $150,000 into the company account. That's something, but it's not enough. 50,000 is missing," I said. Stephen sighed. "I know. Amanda sent me a letter. She says they sold their condo and their cars. That this is all the money they have. She's asking for leniency." "Leniency," I repeated bitterly. Where was her leniency when her father was dying? But the truth was, I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of the pain. Tired of all of it. Tell them they have 3 months to get the remaining 50,000. If they do, I won't press charges. If they don't, I'm going to the police. César aceptó transmitir el mensaje. Pasaron los meses. Me sumergí en el trabajo. The company not only survived without Maxwell, it thrived. It turned out that many of the important contracts he boasted about weren't so important after all. And many clients who were supposedly loyal to him were actually loyal to the quality of service we provided. We closed the year with record profits. Amanda made the final payment exactly 2 days before the deadline. Stephen handed me the check in his office. "She also sent this," he said, handing me an envelope. I opened it. It was a handwritten letter. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. Maxwell and I are getting divorced. I realized too late that he only wanted me for the money, for the company. I lost my father. I lost my inheritance. I lost my marriage. And worst of all, I lost you. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm only asking you to know that I am truly sorry, and that if you ever decide to give me another chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve to be your daughter again. With love, Amanda." I folded the letter and put it in my purse. Maybe someday I could forgive her. Maybe someday we could rebuild something. But not today. Today, it still hurt too much. Today, the house still felt empty without Arthur. Today, I still missed my husband with every fiber of my being. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months after the funeral, I went to the beach house alone. The house Amanda had wanted me to sell. I sat on the deck watching the ocean, a cup of tea in my hands. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. The sea breeze moved my hair. The waves broke gently on the shore, and I could almost hear Arthur's voice saying, "You did it, Celia? I knew you would." There was no one left by my side when it was all over. My daughter is far away, rebuilding her own life. My husband is gone, but the house is finally at peace. The company is secure. And I, Celia Warren, at 67 years old, discovered that strength isn't about having people around you. Strength is about knowing who you are when you're left alone. And I know exactly who I am. I am the woman who built an empire with her husband. The woman who protected that legacy when they tried to snatch it away. The woman who chose her dignity over a daughter, who betrayed her. And if I learned anything from all this, it's that you should never underestimate a woman who seems quiet. Because that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's patience. It's the calm before the storm that sweeps away everything that tries to harm it. Arthur taught me that. And now, every day that I run this company, every decision I make, every success we achieve, is my way of honoring his memory and thanking him for giving me the tools to survive without him. Life goes on. The pain gets smaller, though it never disappears completely. And I keep going, one day at a time, knowing that Arthur would be proud of the woman I continue to be without him by my side.